I never thought I'd be the one standing in my own childhood home, holding a silver tray of appetizers while my mother looked me dead in the eye and told her high society friends that I was the help she'd hired for the evening. It wasn't a joke, and there was no wink to let me in on the prank. She literally looked at the woman who gave birth to me and saw nothing more than a convenient way to keep her reputation pristine. But as I stood there, frozen in my uniform, one of her distinguished guests dropped his wine glass, looked at me with pure shock, and called out a name that wasn't on my fake name tag. It was my professional title, the one my parents had spent years trying to pretend didn't exist. Was I wrong for letting the entire dinner party go up in flames after that, or would you have burned the bridge too? I really need you to tell me if I crossed the line, because by the end of that night, my family's perfect life was in absolute tatters. To understand how I ended up being a waitress at my own family's Thanksgiving, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. My parents, Richard and Alina, are the kind of people who value the vibe of their life more than the reality of it. My father is a corporate lawyer who wears suits to Sunday brunch, and my mother is a woman whose entire personality is built on being the most elegant person in the room. I have a brother, Julian, who followed exactly in their footsteps. He's the golden boy, the Ivy League grad, the guy who married a woman whose father owns half of the downtown skyline. Then there's me, Maya. I was always the difficult one, which in Miller speak means I had a personality and didn't want to marry a hedge fund manager. Growing up, I was constantly reminded that I was the disappointment because I preferred art studios to country clubs and worn-out jeans to silk dresses. The rift became a canyon when I decided not to go to law school. When I told them I wanted to pursue a career in high-end restoration and archival work, specifically for rare artifacts and estate-level historical pieces, my mother literally acted like I'd told her I wanted to be a professional clown. They stopped paying for my life the second I graduated college, which was fine by me. I worked 3 jobs, got my master, and eventually landed a position that people in my field would kill for. I became a senior conservator for one of the most prestigious private foundations in the country. I spend my days handling items worth more than my parents' entire house, but because I come home with dust on my hands instead of a briefcase, they still treat me like I'm a failure. We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 months when my mother called me out of the blue 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Her voice was like honey, which is always the first red flag. She told me how much she missed me, how the house felt empty without her little girl, and how Julian and his wife were going to be there. She begged me to come home for the holiday, promising that things would be different this year and that they were finally ready to respect my choices. I'm a sucker for the idea of a family that loves me, so against my better judgment, I agreed. I took the train down, wearing a nice but sensible coat and carrying a small suitcase. When I arrived, the house was buzzing. My mother had decided to host a massive reconciliation and gratitude dinner, inviting several of my father's biggest clients and some local political heavyweights. I thought I was there as a guest, but the second I walked through the door, my mother pulled me into the mudroom. She didn't hug me. Instead, she looked at my outfit with an expression of pure disgust and told me that she had a surprise for me. She claimed that the catering staff she'd hired had a last-minute cancellation and that she was scrambling. She then handed me a black dress with a white apron and told me that if I wanted to stay, I needed to pitch in. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face stayed stone cold. She told me that her guests were very important and that she hadn't found the right way to explain my alternative lifestyle to them yet. She said it would be easier for everyone if I just played the part of the server for the evening. She actually said the words, "It's better they see you as a professional server than a struggling artist, Maya. It saves us all the embarrassment." I was stunned. The manipulation was so breathtakingly cruel that I almost walked out right then, but then I saw my father walk in, look at me in the apron, and nod as if this was the most logical solution in the world. They had planned this. They invited me back just to use me as a prop to keep their perfect family image intact while hiding the failure daughter in plain sight. I was so hurt and angry that a cold, hard knot formed in my chest. I decided, fine. You want me to be the help? I'll be the best help you've ever had. I spent the next 2 hours passing around hors d'oeuvres and filling champagne flutes. I watched my brother Julian laugh with his father-in-law, pretending he didn't see me every time I walked by. My mother would bark orders at me in front of her friends, saying things like, "Be a dear and refresh the shrimp cocktail, and try not to be so clumsy this time." She was actually getting a thrill out of demeaning me. Her friends would look at me with that pitying, dismissive gaze people reserve for service staff they think are beneath them. I was a ghost in my own home. But then, the doorbell rang for the final guests. My father rushed to the door to greet Dr. Eris Thorne. Now, if you aren't in the world of high-end art or history, that name means nothing to you. But in my world, Dr. Thorne is a titan. He's a billionaire philanthropist and the primary trustee of the foundation I work for. He's essentially my boss's boss's boss, and a man I've worked with closely on several high-profile restorations. My father had been trying to get into Thorne's inner circle for years to secure a massive retainer for his firm. As Thorne walked into the foyer, my mother motioned for me to come over immediately with the tray of sparkling water. She wanted to show off how attentive her household was. She stepped in front of me, blocked my face for a second, and said, "Dr. Thorne, we are so honored. Please, let our maid take your coat and offer you a refreshment." I stepped forward, holding the tray, my eyes downcast as I'd been doing all night. But Dr. Thorne isn't the kind of man who ignores the people serving him. He looked down to take a glass, paused, and then the glass slipped right through his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The room went silent. My mother gasped, looking at me with absolute fury, ready to scream at me for the mess. But before she could open her mouth, Dr. Thorne ignored the broken glass and grabbed my hand. He looked at me with total bewilderment and said, "Director Miller, Maya. What on earth are you doing in an apron?" So, that is the moment where my life changed. My parents were standing there, mouths agape, watching the most powerful man in the room treat their disappointing daughter like royalty. I had a choice to make. I could play along and save their reputation, or I could tell the truth. Before I tell you how the rest of that dinner went down and the absolute chaos that followed, I want you to stop right now. Imagine you are me. You've been belittled, hidden, and treated like a servant by the people who are supposed to love you most. Now the person who holds your career in his hands is standing there, confused. What would you do? Would you protect your parents' lie to keep the peace, or would you let the truth come out? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would have done in my shoes. I'll wait. Okay, so Dr. Thorne is staring at me, and my mother is turning a shade of purple I didn't know was humanly possible. My father tried to jump in, stuttering about how I was just helping out for fun, and how I have such a whimsical sense of humor. He actually tried to laugh it off, reaching out to pat me on the shoulder like we were all in on a big joke. I stepped back, avoiding his touch, and looked Dr. Thorne straight in the eye. I didn't whisper. I didn't shy away. I said, "I'm not helping out for fun, Dr. Thorne." My parents told me that my career in restoration was an embarrassment to the family name, so they asked me to serve their guests tonight so they wouldn't have to explain what I actually do for a living. They introduced me as the maid because, to them, that's more respectable than being a senior conservator. The silence that followed was so heavy you could have heard a pin drop 3 houses away. Dr. Thorne's expression went from confusion to a cold, hard mask of professional disgust. He looked at my father, then my mother, and then back to me. He said, "Alina, Richard, you told me your daughter was away on a spiritual retreat because she couldn't handle the pressure of the real world. You didn't mention she was the lead director for the most significant Byzantine restoration project in the country, a project my foundation is currently funding to the tune of $8 million. The guests started whispering. The political figures and the clients my father had worked so hard to impress were now staring at my parents like they were some kind of bizarre social experiment. My mother tried to salvage it, she really did. She let out this high-pitched, nervous giggle and said, "Oh, Dr. Thorne, you know how kids are, they exaggerate their titles. Maya is just a junior assistant, really, and she's always been so dramatic." Dr. Thorne didn't even look at her. He looked at me and asked, "Maya, did they really make you wear this to serve them?" I just nodded, feeling the tears finally start to sting my eyes. I told him, "I came here because I thought they wanted to see me. I didn't know I was being hired as a prop." Dr. Thorne turned to my father and said, "Richard, I came here tonight to discuss the long-term representation of my estate. But I find it impossible to trust the integrity of a man who would humiliate his own daughter to satisfy his vanity. If you can lie to your friends about your own blood, I can only imagine what you'd do with my accounts." He then turned to me, offered me his arm, and said, "Director Miller, I think it's time we leave. There's a wonderful bistro open in the city, and I'd much rather hear about the progress on the gold leafing than stay for a dinner seasoned with this much disrespect. I didn't hesitate. I stripped off that ridiculous apron right there in the foyer, dropped it on the floor, and walked out the front door without looking back. As we walked to his car, I could hear my mother screaming at my father and Julian trying to chase after us, shouting about how I was ruining everything. The fallout was massive. Dr. Thorne followed through on his word and pulled all his business from my father's firm, and because he's so influential, several other clients followed suit. My father's reputation in the legal community took a massive hit once the story of the Thanksgiving Maid started circulating through the country club gossip mill. My mother has tried to call me a dozen times, mostly to blame me for their financial losses and social exile, but I've blocked them all. My brother sent me an email saying I was selfish for not just playing along for one night, which only confirmed that I made the right choice in cutting them off. I realized that night that you can't fix people who see you as an accessory rather than a human being. I'm now living my best life, focusing on my work, and spending my holidays with people who actually value me for who I am, not who they want me to be. Sometimes, you have to burn the whole house down just to see who was actually standing in your corner. If there's one thing I learned, it's that your worth isn't defined by the people who raised you, but by the work you do and the respect you demand for yourself. If you've ever had to stand up to a toxic family, you know how terrifying but liberating that first step is. Don't ever let someone dim your light just because it's shining in their eyes. Like this video if you were on my side, and think my parents got exactly what they deserved. Subscribe for more stories about people standing up for themselves and taking back their power. I want to hear your thoughts on this whole mess. Did I go too far by exposing them in front of their guests, or was it the perfect revenge? Let's talk about it in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.